vagueness versus specificity. Don't be discouraged or confused by this word specificity. It's from the word specific. Be specific. Like, I'm talking to you. Specificity versus vagueness or generalities. I told you about the class schedule. We were in China for 4 years, and every summer I would come back, and I'm a retired Army colonel, so I would do, at the time I was a major, captain, I would do active duty at a place like Fort Jackson for 2 weeks. I'd make a lot of money for me, and go back to China. And my wife would come back, and she'd prepare all her lessons, and she'd spend hours and hours. I said, hon, don't prepare your lessons. Why? Because when you come back to China, what you thought you were teaching is not what you're going to teach. They're going to change your schedule. No, they wouldn't do that. I said, yes, they will. Every year. No, you're not going to teach conversation. You're going to teach intensive writing. Every English department in China has intensive writing and extensive writing. Reading. Intensive reading, extensive reading. So scheduling is not that important. Did I tell Iceberg? Sorry. Did I tell the iceberg story when I was here before? Did you?
I don't recall.
Oh, okay, okay, good.
I think that'd be good.
This gives you an idea. I was in a taxi in China, at right near Tiananmen Square, near the Beijing Hotel. And I was in the taxi, and in the back, a Chinese guy got in. What was his last name, family name? Wang, very good, Wang. It could be Wang, it could be John, you know, one of those two. How about Americans? What do they say? They say Wang. Okay, are you Mr. Wang? There's no sound like that in Chinese. So, Wang or John? Okay, I don't know, maybe, let's say it was Wang. And he gets in. And then on the other side, an American guy gets in, and his name is Goldberg. Now, when you hear Goldberg, what do you think? That's true. That's an exception, yeah. Okay, when I hear that, that's very good. That helps me be more careful. The word Goldberg really is usually a Jewish name. Okay, it's a, you know, Jewish, for Israel, it's a Jewish name. This guy was a Jewish guy. Now, some of you are going to say, oh, Dr. Edgren's politically incorrect. Hey, you know, I'm too old to worry about that. Lock me up, you know. Okay, and it's not meant in any way. I'm pro-Israel, by the way. I'm not for the Muslim cause at all, but I understand some of the problems. Anyway, Goldberg gets in, Wang's here, I'm in the front, and we're riding along. All of a sudden, Goldberg reaches over and hits Wang right in the nose, and the blood is coming down. And Wang says, what was that for? And Goldberg says, that was for sinking the Titanic. Wang says, sinking the Titanic? The Chinese didn't sink the Titanic. The Japanese sunk the Titanic. Oh, a little later, Wang reaches over and hits Goldberg right in the nose. Blood coming down. And Goldberg says, what was, oh, before that, Goldberg said, when he says Chinese didn't do it, Japanese did. Goldberg says, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, what's the difference? That's what Americans are. Wang gets Goldberg and then blood coming down. Goldberg says, what was that for? Wang says, that was for sinking the Titanic. Sinking the Titanic? The Jews didn't sink the Titanic. An iceberg did it, Wang said. Iceberg, Goldberg, what's the difference? So, a lot of times in China, the reason I tell that story, the real reason I tell that story, I have no reason to tell that story. I just want to tell a funny story. But when someone pressed, why did you tell that story? Because of the vagueness. The vagueness in China. A guy walked in, we said, we heard he got married. He walked in. I said, oh, Xiao Liu, I heard you got married. Could be. Could be. I mean, it's like, to be specific is dangerous. During a movement in China, all the Chinese know about it, some of you know about it, they call it the 100 Flowers movement. 100 Flowers? The communist officials, I think it was, I don't know who it was, I don't think it was Deng, it might have been Mao, someone, let 100 flowers bloom. Let 100 flowers bloom. In other words, we want to hear all kinds of viewpoints. We don't want to just hear, we don't want you to just be obedient to us. We want to hear every kind of viewpoint. Well, the Chinese said, no, I don't know, we would like to criticize you, but we're a little bit afraid to criticize you. No, it's okay, we want to hear you criticize us. So some brave people said, well, you know, there's this problem, there's this problem. The people who told the truth, they put them in stoop labor. Do you know what stoop labor is? That's cleaning the bathrooms all day long, cleaning what we call in the army the latrine. That's all they did for 20 years. So consequently, the Chinese society is still very careful, as a rule, very careful about what they say, and more likely to give you a half and half answer, because it's a little dangerous to be really truthful. It's changing in China, but generally that's the case. Okay, another story to show this. The Chinese ambassador and the American ambassador were in Switzerland, and the American ambassador said, this is way back 1972. Anybody know in America? Richard Nixon. Your president is not a crook. Richard Nixon was the president. And the Chinese ambassador and the American ambassador were talking. The American ambassador said, the difference between Chinese society, now bear in mind, 1972 was right in the middle of the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976. Very, very difficult time. If you were an intellectual, by the way, you can be an intellectual without being intelligent. There's a difference between being intelligent and being an intellectual. You can be an intellectual just because you're interested in intellectual things. But in those days, if you were a professor, you had to go out in the countryside and work to prove that you were like a common person. And if you had any relatives in the West, it was a real tough time of culture. And it's not that I'm saying this as an American. Every Chinese person will tell you 1966 to 70 is a very, very difficult time in China. 1972, the American ambassador says to the Chinese ambassador, the difference between America and China is this. He said, I can fly on the Concorde, which was the supersonic plane out of Paris in those days, to Washington, D.C., and I can take a taxi to the White House, and I can ask to see President Nixon, and I can knock on the door, and when President Nixon lets me in, I can say, President Nixon, you're a fool! And the guy says, Chinese ambassador says, we can do that. We can do that in China too. No, yes. He said, I take the airplane, I go to Beijing, I go to the Great Hall of the People. I say, can I see Mao Zedong? Okay, come in. Hello, Chairman Mao. President Nixon is a fool! Now that's the difference between cultures. In other words, we would say, you misunderstood. You misunderstood me. No, you're getting the general picture. So that's another joke that struggles to have a relationship.